Sharon's gone. I need your help. Do you know what's going on here?
Doc closes the door to Silent Hill.
The fire started 30 years ago.
She looks exactly like Sharon. Why?
The story isn't hers alone, but all of ours.
I'm burning.
Find your daughter, you must face the darkness of hell.
Soの町からは死んでも逃げられない。サイレントヒル。
Alright, hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Rob here at Smirking Gun Reviews, and we are now on the 8th installment of the Halloween streaming reviews for 2020. And boy oh boy, did we have the 8th one land on a pretty crazy movie. This is Silent Hill back in 2006, based on the video game series that I played a long time ago. I'll tell you something. There are moments in those games that I don't have to play again. They stick with me like I'm being haunted by the game almost. Like whenever I think about this game, I just get creeped out. And that's one of the biggest strengths of tonight's movie, is that of all the video game adaptations that have been out there, this is one that really, at least, feels like the game. Now, are there inaccuracies? Of course there are. There are inaccuracies in everything that gets adapted, and this is no different. But before we get started, I just want to say, if you're enjoying the content, please make sure you hit subscribe and like and all that shit. Because I'm just so good at promoting myself. But I really want to say thanks to anybody who chooses to watch these. I'm not, you know, I don't usually do movie reviews. I usually stick to TV, occasionally doing movies. I try to do movies when I can. And this is kind of a special thing, and maybe I'll do more movies as time goes on. We'll see. I'm kind of burning the candle at both ends lately, so we'll see how much time I have. Also, keep an eye out for the Mandalorian Season 2 reviews that are going to be starting on Friday. You're not going to be able to miss them. And we got a whole bunch of other stuff coming as well, but right now we're just kind of taking a backseat to a lot of other projects. So Silent Hill from 2006, which, you know, was I guess you could call this a successful film. I mean, it had like a $50 million budget, opened like at $20 million. It was #1 at the box office. And eventually, you know, it's got a cult following, has made like $100 million worldwide. And I mean, that eventually means they made their money back. But is it a good movie? Is it a good movie, you know, after the fact, besides the games? Because there are, during the chat that we had, a live chat, I had a couple of super fans. A couple of the people in the chat are super fans of Silent Hill. And there was a lot of like things that they brought up that were changes that to regular average Joe six-pack wouldn't understand those changes. If you were a person who knew the games, you would know all these changes right away. But like most things, right? Like most things that are from an established IP, they still have to make it for a mass audience, which means that they will always try to be faithful, but they've got to be able to make it so that, like I said, regular average people that don't know Silent Hill from Walking Dead, you know, to get them in the theater. And so that can be maddening for fans, is having to watch kind of a dumbed down version of what you like. But this isn't really dumbed down, in my opinion. They've just made changes to it. Clearly the people who made this movie saw the games. Do I think they understood the story? Maybe. Do I think there was studio interference that made them make changes? Probably. But this movie is pretty great, even though I don't love it like a couple of the people I think like it a lot more in the chat than I did. But I still think this is a pretty decent movie and definitely one of the best video game adaptations out there. So if you don't know, Silent Hill, the movie anyway, okay, let's just forget about the games for a second, because the main antagonist or protagonist in the game, for the first game, is a guy. Now, they switch it up here and have the main protagonist be a woman, Rose, played by Radha Mitchell, who you would remember from Pitch Black. She was kind of big for like a minute there, and now I don't really see her in too much, but she's a pretty good actress. Her husband, played by Sean Bean of, I Get Killed in Every Movie, Sean Bean, in TV show, plays her husband Chris, and they've got an adopted daughter named Sharon who goes on like sleepwalking trips, and they find her at the edge of a waterfall, a huge ravine, which is actually a pretty intense scene, talking about Silent Hill and how the mother, Rose, feels like they need to take her to this place to try to maybe figure out what's wrong with her. The husband, he's been doing research on the internet, this is 2006 internet, by the way, into ghost towns and how Silent Hill is this tainted ghost town. He doesn't think she should go, but she goes off anyway without his, go ahead, and with their adopted daughter, and trying to get answers. He cancels the credit cards on her too, and basically the rest of the movie is Sharon taking Rose taking Sharon to Silent Hill, Christopher in pursuit, trying to find, make sure that his wife and daughter are safe, because this place he doesn't trust, and he's rightfully got those heebie-jeebies. But in the meantime, once she arrives, things get really, really ghostly. There's a cult involved, and all sorts of, nightmare fuel monsters that really, for anybody going into this movie, aren't going to understand what any of it means. They're just not. If you just are sitting there watching this at home for the first time, you have no idea what Silent Hill is. There is no context to what any of these monsters mean. They just are nightmare fuel. So if you like that, fine. But if you're one of those people that needs to have an explanation for things, like why is this guy got a giant pyramid on his head? Why are these weird things walking all funny, crying like babies? Why is that contortionist coming at her like in... You're not going to get any of that subtext that you do in the games that explains that Silent Hill, basically, as I was told, because I needed some explanations told to me through this, and I am not too proud to say that I needed explanations, because even when I was playing the game, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I understood this game and this movie more tonight from the chat than I have in the past 14 years. But basically, this place, plays out things that makes you face things that you've done or repressed, and does it in the most horrifying way possible. So in the game, the character, there's a reason he's seeing what he's seeing. And since they thought it looked cool, they just put it in the movie without any context. And since the character of Rose isn't the same character as the game, it doesn't really make sense that they have these monsters in there. They don't really have anything that represents her. But you wouldn't know that unless you understood the lore of the game. Otherwise, it's just crazy nightmare world. But she goes on this journey to find her kid, hooks up with Laurie Holden, who I love from the X-Files, who played Marita Covarrubias. Yes, I went all the way back to that. I didn't start with The Walking Dead. She was also she's a Frank Darabont, veteran, with being in The Majestic and The Mist, and yes, The Walking Dead, which was also originally Frank Darabont, and also on The Americans. She was on The Americans late in that series, and she's good here too, and she's just as confusing. Her character actually feels like the cop in the game, because I didn't understand what the cop was doing. I understood her character actually better in the movie than I did in the cop character in the game. And yeah, Laurie Holden, great actress. I really dig her a lot. There's a lot of people in this that I actually like. We got Deborah Kara Unger, who looks unrecognizable in this movie. And Deborah Kara Unger is a out of the park home run of a good-looking lady, okay? They really effed her up in this movie. This also has the most cleaned up version of Kim Coates. Is that how you pronounce his name, from Sons of Anarchy? You will never, I have never seen that actor not play at least a sweaty guy or a dirtbag. He's always really just, I don't know. In this is like, he was like fucking Mulder in this. He had his, like, he was clean cut and in his detective outfit and everything, and talking all like he wasn't manic or anything. I actually was really happy to see that, yes, Kim Coates, Coates, I don't know, I'm going to say Coates, got to play a regular cop. Just a regular cop doing his job. I was just like, holy crap, that's amazing. You also have Alice Krige, who plays Christabella in this, and Alice Krige is famous for being infamous in movies. Okay, this lady plays crazy in movies like nobody's business. She's been in tons of things that you'd recognize her from. She's one of those people you go, but once you see her in a movie, you go, oh, there she is, being crazy as hell again. And she's great in this too, is doing what she does best. You know, she's the leader of this cult, you know, who's an ultra religious fanatic, you know, and it's just there's not you don't need a lot of backstory for these characters to understand. They do give some exposition of why this town is the way it is. They always keep liking to talk about how it was a coal mine underneath that's still on fire. There was a huge accident there. And basically it feels like the end of the world there. Ash falling from the sky. Sirens going. But the town is not the same. The town is cursed. The town is full of nightmares. And how or why anybody still lives there, I can only assume that it's because they're all stuck there. But that's the gist of the movie. Rose trying to find Sharon and get her kid out. Meanwhile, Laurie Holden is along for the ride as the cop. And just them maneuvering through this nightmare world as Chris and the cop played by, whose name is Gucci, Officer Gucci, try to track down Rose themselves, somehow being in the town and unable to find her. That's the non-spoiler way to talk about it. Now, to talk about this movie, though, we have to talk about the games as well. And what this movie does so well is recreate the world of Silent Hill. The look of it, the feel of it, the sounds of it, the music, everything, it's in here. The monsters and things like that may be out of context, may not really have a place for an explanation for why they're here. But it doesn't stop it from being scary as hell. There are so many moments in this movie that are taken right out of the games. In fact, like the beginning of this, her walking through Silent Hill is just like the beginning of the game. And then you have the sirens. When those sirens hit, those sirens creep me out more than the monsters, because they remind me of when I was a kid, we would have Bible plays at conventions that we would go to in the cult that I was in. And they would put on passion plays of biblical times from like way back in Israelite and Egyptian times. And every once in a while they would play God's horns. Now if you know what I'm talking about, you know that shit is actually scary. And you don't need context. If you just start hearing that noise, they did that noise at the end of Kevin Smith's Red State. And when I heard it for the first time in like a long time, I was legit terrified. Because it made me think of a memory that I couldn't quite place for a second. And when I hear those sirens in this movie, even though they're just air raid, kind of, you know, get down kind of sirens, It's creepy as hell. It means get out of it. It's already a nightmare here. You can't see anything, and there's sirens going off. But the sirens here mean something even worse. It means that you're about to change realities. So like this place looks like hell hit it, and then it turns into hell. And the transitions that they do in this, where it switches from just this to dark, gray, rainy, rotted. The worn down buildings look even worse. They look rusted out. They look broken out. And in this time, if you're not in somewhere safe, this is when the nightmares come find you. And in this moment, like right at the beginning, I remember this from the game. The first time she hears the sirens and it goes dark and she's chasing a kid, which you do in the game. She starts running through the gates, the chain link gates. And I remember this and I was going, oh God, we get to that moment where there's those gray creatures that walk weird and are crying like babies, and they're underneath it's all on fire, to basically kind of symbolize, I think the people that died, some of the people that died there, but also it has context, would have had context with the characters in the game and stuff. And it really hits you. It's really effective. It's really scary. And even though, again, this is 2006 and we were hitting that this was a movie that used some practical effects, most of it's CGI, and it holds up for the most part. In fact, there's some parts in this movie where I actually feel like I'm watching a real life like a cutscene, and I realize that it's actually live action. There's a few moments in that really do make me feel like I'm in a game, and this is one of those moments. And of course, you can't have Silent Hill without having more nightmare creatures like that. There's a guy who's like walking backwards, and that you just get a contortionist and you goop them all up. And then, of course, you have Pyramid Head. Now, Pyramid Head, without context, is just this crazy looking, dude with a huge thing in his head. He carries around a sword as big as clouds from Final Fantasy VII. Okay? And he's got like these bugs that follow him that have like people faces. It's just horrifying. It's awesome. And so throughout this whole thing, yeah, it's creepy. It's scary. It's tense. The character of Rose reacts in ways that you would. I know that we were kind of like, move, run, whatever. But like when you're faced with stuff like this, you don't know whether, I could understand if you didn't know whether to shit or go blind. Like just in total shock of the horror that you're seeing would freeze you, I would think, like at times. And they really do that well here. And again, it also, being a video game adaptation, does that really well. How? I'll tell you how. Because even though you're not running around shooting or, blasting away like in a Resident Evil game or whatever, this does feel like progression in a game. Like the story feels like you're progressing through it like you would in a video game, getting through level to level, going from location to location, getting thing here, finding info here, and it just works like that. So the people who made this did understand, like, they're making a video game adaptation, and in that way it does feel like you're watching a video game cutscene, just without the gameplay. But the story does get really, for me, I kept having to ask what the hell is going on. Because these games, like, for me, never really translated well. There's still a lot of games out there for me that are like JRPGs, things like that I really have to go, okay, whatever you say, man, and but your gameplay is great, so I'm just going to go off of that and not worry so much about the story. But this is a movie, and the story's important to be able to follow. And I think a lot of people probably would be confused with this. It was nice to have a couple of translators in the chat to be able to guide me through this a little bit. But, once they get to where they need to go, which is this church, that's where you find out about the cult. That's where you find out what they did and what the purpose of all this place is. And that's where we're going to get into, like, more real, like, spoilers here, is that Deborah Kara Unger's character named Dahlia, had a daughter, and she had a daughter out of wedlock. She had and she wouldn't say who or an affair or something of those lines, and she wouldn't say who the husband was. And basically, the church, the fanatical church that was here, that's worshiping this goddess. Look, I'm not going to go into full detail about this because it made my head spin and hurt a little bit. But they basically called the child a sin, and they burned the child because the mother wouldn't, like, tell them who the father was, and that the kid must be a witch because that's how adultery works. So this cult is heavily into this thing that causes they do what they do to the kid, but there's a demon that the little kid that gets burned makes a pact with, basically putting a curse on this town. And I'm not going to go too far into it because I know I'm going to screw this up if I haven't already. And now everybody there is trapped in this little girl's nightmare. She's become powerful after they've done what they did to her. And part of her, when she made this pact, split, and the good part of her was sent out of there, put in an orphanage, and is Sharon, and that's why she has this connection to Silent Hill, is that she's part of a whole of another person. Yeah. And so again, it's kind of like in for a penny, in for a pound. You're either in for the ride, you know, buy the ticket, take the ride kind of thing. And so it's about her still finding her kid and getting out of there before this cult, you know, is able to stop them. And of course they do. Laurie Holden's character gets, I mean, I'm telling you, it said spoilers at the beginning, you know, like Laurie Holden does her best to try to help Rose. She ends up getting like torched. They put her over a fire on a ladder. Laurie Holden dies a lot in movies, guys, and this one's bad too. I mean, it's really, really sad. She's sitting there, Mama, please, you know, be with me and all this, and she just burns up, and I was just like, oh my God. You know, they stab Radha Mitchell in the chest, you know, blood coming out. The Pyramid Head grabs a woman, rips off her clothes, and then grabs her chest so hard that he pulls her skin and just rips her whole like skin off like a bodysuit and flings it at a door. This movie is a hard R at times and really brutal. And moments like that really do hit you. Some of the CGI stuff, a little less so, because you can just tell it's not real fake. I mean, it's not really real. But some of the things, like the deaths at the end where all this like barbed wire comes out and is ripping people in half, looks great. And so it's just all those ways this movie works. The only way this movie doesn't work for me is that it's just a bit too confusing if you don't know the lore. That's not a bad thing, you know? I think a lot of people were probably confused by this movie and probably still got some enjoyment out of it. And you can. It helps if you know the lore, though. Like a lot of things that have an IP. But that's the one thing this movie really didn't do very well, was explain things really that great. There were some exposition scenes that did explain things that were done really well. I liked that it looked like old film, really grainy and shit, that talked about how the kid became what she was, the history of the town, that there were good people that lived there, you know. But this also happened like 30 years ago, so it makes you wonder, like, where are they even in time? But this movie holds up. It's a lot better than I remember. It is 2 hours long, which is really long for a movie like this. You would figure it'd be about an hour 30, hour 40, but they pushed it to 2 hours. Did it need to be that long? Kind of. I really do think that in order to tell the stories right, you had to get as far into it as possible. Also to give some of the fans what they wanted. And I think if you cut to the chase a little too quickly, you would have had to lose more of the scary parts, and you'd have just a lot of talking, and it wouldn't have been as interesting. Also, you would have lost probably, you know, they probably would have cut a lot of Sean Bean's stuff for him trying to find his wife. Now, the ending of this, if you haven't seen any of the other movies, is a little hit or miss. I had it explained to me a little bit better because I needed some context because I hadn't seen the sequels. The first time I saw this movie, I was really kind of like bummed out. But knowing that now that in sequels, some of this stuff is kind of explained or carried on with and other things, so where it ends really feels like a cliffhanger slash downer video game. Like, this does feel like the end of a video game, because a lot of these kind of games don't just end with like everybody walking off into the, you know, like happily ever after. A lot of these kind of games do leave you like feeling like you've been on an incredible journey, but one that has, you know, not that great of happy results. And that's kind of the way this movie ends, is that you feel a little hopeful, but at the same time it's also like, you know, pulling the rug out from under you. But I do recommend this movie, and especially if you're a fan of Silent Hill or a fan of survival horror games, or, you know, you haven't for some reason watched this and think there are no good video game adaptations. This one is a good adaptation of a game because, like I said, you feel like you're in the game if you understand or know the games. And if you don't understand the games, by watching this, you pretty much kind of have, even if it's not the version that a lot of fans would tell you they'd want you to see. So anyway, that was Silent Hill. I hope you liked listening to me talk about it as I was trying to figure out how to talk about it while I'm going along. Otherwise, please hit the like button, comment, share, subscribe, and the bell for all notifications. We are doing Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1978 on Wednesday at 8 o'clock. So you can join the live chat then, and then, well, there'll be a review after. I don't know what we're doing after that, though. You can also find me on Twitch at Smirking Gun Plays, all one word, where we're always playing games and talking pop culture there. So, this is Rob saying have a great day. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye. Woo.